You cannot even parallel park. Those 5 words still echo in my mind like the countdown before a rocket launch. 5 words that were meant to destroy me. 5 words that instead became the fuel that would propel me beyond every limitation, every doubt, every person who ever dared to tell me what I could not achieve. My name is Zara Blackwood. I am 37 years old. And I have been underestimated since the moment I first dared to dream out loud. The cruelest thing about being underestimated is not the initial blow. It is the way it seeps into your bones, whispering poison in the quiet moments when you are alone with your thoughts. It is the way it makes you question not just your abilities, but your very right to dream at all. When I was 9 years old, I stood in front of my 4th grade class during career day, my small hands trembling as I held up a picture I had drawn of myself floating among the stars. I want to be an astronaut, I announced, my voice barely above a whisper, but filled with the kind of pure conviction that only children possess. Mrs. Henderson, my teacher, smiled that patronizing smile adults reserve for children who dare to dream too big. That is cute, Zara. But maybe you should think of something more realistic. Realistic. That word would haunt me for decades. At 16, when I marched into my guidance counselor's office with college brochures spread across his desk like battle plans, my eyes blazing with determination as I pointed to the aerospace engineering programs, Mr. Thompson barely looked up from his paperwork. Secretarial work, he said, sliding a community college pamphlet across the desk. That is more your speed. Nice, stable career for a girl like you. A girl like me. What did that even mean? Was it because I was quiet? Because I came from a single-parent household where my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on? Because I did not look like the boys in the advanced math classes who seemed to own the world before they had even graduated high school? But the worst blow came at 25, when I finally found the courage to share my most audacious dream with someone I thought loved me. Devin Hartley, my boyfriend of 2 years. The man I thought would stand by me through anything. I had been working on my theories for months, staying up until 3 in the morning, sketching designs on napkins, filling notebook after notebook with calculations that made my head spin but my heart soar. I had this vision, this impossible, beautiful vision of revolutionizing space exploration itself. I did not want to just work in space exploration. I wanted to tear down every barrier that made it exclusive, expensive, unreachable for most of the world. I wanted to design a reusable propulsion system so affordable and efficient that universities and research labs around the globe could access the stars without bankrupting themselves. The night I finally told Devin, we were sitting on his couch, the television playing some mindless comedy in the background. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my latest sketches, my voice trembling with excitement and terror as I began to explain my plans. I am going to build my own rocket prototype, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know it sounds crazy, but I have been working on these calculations, and I think I have figured out a way to reduce fuel costs by 70% while increasing efficiency by. That is when it happened. Devin looked at my sketches, looked at me, and then he laughed. Not a gentle chuckle or a nervous giggle. He laughed so hard that beer shot out of his nose, so hard that he doubled over, so hard that tears streamed down his face. You, he gasped between fits of laughter. You cannot even parallel park. Those words hit me like a physical blow. The sketches fell from my hands, scattering across the floor like broken dreams. For a moment, I could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but sit there while the man I loved reduced years of work, years of hope, to a punchline. I am serious, I whispered, but my voice had lost all its power. So am I, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. Zara honey, you are sweet, but rocket science? Come on, be realistic. There was that word again. Realistic. That night, I walked home in the rain, my sketches soggy and ruined in my backpack, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I stood in my tiny apartment, looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, and for the first time in my life, I almost gave up. Almost. But something deep inside me, something that had been building since I was 9 years old, refused to let Devin's laughter be the end of my story. That something whispered a truth that would change everything. The people who tell you it is impossible are usually the ones who never tried. By 30, my life looked like a disaster from the outside. I lived in a shoebox apartment where the rent was 3 weeks overdue. My laptop held together with duct tape and prayers. My garage laboratory was a fire hazard that violated probably every safety code in existence, powered by extension cords and sheer determination. But I also had something that nobody could take from me, no matter how hard they tried. The dream. And I had learned something crucial in those 5 years since Devon's laughter shattered my confidence. I had learned that when people tell you something is impossible, they are usually talking about their own limitations, not yours. I sold everything I owned to fund my research. My car went first, then my guitar collection that I had been building since high school. The hardest sale was my mother's vintage china set, the one she had given me when I moved out, the one that represented the only beautiful things our family had ever owned. "Are you sure about this, baby?" my mother asked when I told her what I was doing. But there was no judgment in her voice, only concern. She had been the one person who never told me to be realistic. "I am sure, Mom," I said, and for the first time in years I truly was. The failures came fast and brutal. 10 different test configurations that ended in spectacular disasters. One battery cell exploded so violently that it left scorch marks on my garage ceiling that are still there today. Another test melted the wiring so completely that I had to start over from scratch. I applied for every startup grant I could find. 47 applications. 47 rejections. The letters were all variations of the same theme. "While your enthusiasm is admirable, your proposal lacks the technical sophistication and financial backing necessary for serious consideration." I pitched to investors who looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Some walked out mid-presentation. Others stayed just long enough to be polite before delivering their rejections with practiced smiles and empty promises to keep in touch. The lowest point came when I was accepted to present at a major STEM conference, only to discover that they had listed me in the program as a hobbyist, rather than a researcher. I stood at that podium, looking out at an audience of mostly empty chairs, and spoke to maybe 15 people about 5 years of my life's work. But you know what? I wore that hobbyist label like armor. Because hobbyists build things for the love of it, not for recognition or money or approval. Hobbyists change the world because they cannot help themselves. When I finally got a working model at 33, my hands shook as I sent the test results to every major aerospace agency and university in the country. 58 emails. 58 carefully crafted messages that represented everything I had sacrificed, everything I had learned, everything I had become in the process of chasing an impossible dream. 57 of them never responded. The 58th changed everything. Dr. Lila Chun was a retired professor from a small liberal arts college that most people had never heard of. She had spent her career teaching physics to students who would never work for NASA, never design rockets, never touch the stars. But she had never stopped believing that science belonged to everyone. Her email was simple. "Your work is remarkable. Would you consider giving a guest lecture to my students? I think they need to hear your story." I almost said no. What was the point of presenting to a handful of college students at a school nobody knew? But something in Dr. Chen's message resonated with me. Maybe it was the word remarkable. Maybe it was the fact that she wanted my story, not just my research. The lecture was supposed to last 1 hour. I spoke for 3. I stood in front of those 22 students, and I told them everything. About the teacher who called my dreams cute. About the guidance counselor who pushed secretarial work. About Devon's laughter and the beer shooting out of his nose. About the garage fires and the melted wiring, and the investor meetings that ended in humiliation. But I also showed them my working prototype. I explained my propulsion system using a balloon and a coffee mug, breaking down complex aerospace engineering into concepts that anyone could understand. I watched their eyes light up as they realized that science was not some mystical art reserved for geniuses, but something that could be built piece by piece, failure by failure, dream by dream. One of Dr. Chen's students recorded the presentation on her phone. She posted it to social media that night with the caption, "This woman is changing the world and nobody knows it yet." The video went viral. 8 million views in 2 weeks. Comments poured in from around the world. Engineers, students, parents, dreamers who had been told their ideas were impossible. The video was shared by celebrities, scientists, and ordinary people who saw something in my story that resonated with their own struggles. Then the calls started coming. Stanford, JPL, space agencies from 3 different countries. Investors who had ghosted me years earlier suddenly wanted meetings. The same STEM conference that had labeled me a hobbyist invited me to be their keynote speaker. But the call that meant the most came from an unexpected source. The private donor who had once called my dream impossible during a particularly brutal investor meeting 5 years earlier. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had made his fortune in tech before moving into aerospace investments. "How much do you need to expand your operations?" he asked, his voice completely different from the dismissive tone I remembered. "Excuse me," I said, certain I had misheard. "Your lab, your research, your team. What do you need to take this to the next level?" The number I gave him was probably too conservative. I was still thinking like someone who had spent years scraping together funding from garage sales and part-time jobs. But Marcus did not even blink. "Done," he said. "But I have one condition. I want you to hire other people like you. The ones who have been told they are not technical enough, not qualified enough, not realistic enough. Can you do that?" I could barely speak. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I can do that." The Blackwood Initiative was born 6 months later. We started with a real laboratory, proper equipment, and a team of 12 brilliant minds who had all been underestimated at some point in their lives. Women who had been pushed out of engineering programs. Immigrants whose degrees were not recognized. Young people from backgrounds like mine who had been told that space was not for people like them. Our first major breakthrough came within a year. A propulsion efficiency improvement that reduced fuel costs by 68% while increasing payload capacity by 30%. The numbers were so impressive that NASA asked us to run independent verification tests. We passed every single one. Partnership offers started flooding in. 3 international space programs wanted to license our technology. Private companies offered acquisition deals that would have made me wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. But I turned them all down. Because this was never about the money. This was about proving that impossible is just another word for, has not been done yet. 2 years later, we launched our first suborbital test. I stood in the mission control room that we had built from scratch, surrounded by the team of dreamers and misfits who had helped make this moment possible, and watched our prototype streak across the sky like a shooting star made real. When the test was declared a complete success, the room erupted in cheers. But I found myself thinking about that 9-year-old girl, who had stood in front of her class with a drawing of herself among the stars. I thought about every person who had ever told her to be realistic. They had no idea what realistic actually meant. Last week, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I had not seen in over a decade. Devin Hartley, the man whose laughter had once shattered my confidence and nearly derailed my dreams. "Hey Zara," the message read. "I saw you on the news. Congratulations on everything. Really incredible stuff. Would love to catch up sometime. Maybe grab coffee and hear about your journey." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply with something cutting. Something that would let him know exactly how his words had affected me all those years ago. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Instead, I did something better. I posted a new masterclass to my education platform. Turning mockery into momentum. How to transform doubt into rocket fuel. It was everything I had learned about converting criticism into courage. About using other people's limitations as launching pads for your own success. The course went live at midnight. By morning, it had over 1,000 enrollments. Devin Hartley was enrollment number 37. Full price, no discount. I never replied to his message. But I did send him an automatic email thanking him for his purchase, and reminding him that all sales were final. Today, I stand in my laboratory, surrounded by equations that would have seemed impossible to that 9-year-old girl with the crayon drawing. The walls are covered with patents, partnership agreements, and photos from our successful launches. But the thing I am most proud of is the framed picture on my desk. 23 young women and men, our latest cohort of initiative scholars, holding their acceptance letters to graduate programs in aerospace engineering. Every single one of them had been told at some point that they were not realistic enough, not qualified enough, not the right fit for their dreams. Every single one of them proved those voices wrong. Because here is what I have learned in my journey from that garage laboratory to this moment. The people who tell you something is impossible are usually the ones who gave up on their own dreams. They are not trying to protect you from failure. They are trying to protect themselves from the possibility that you might succeed where they could not even try. Your dreams do not need their permission. Your vision does not require their approval. Your success does not depend on their understanding. When someone tells you that your dream is impossible, do not argue with them. Do not try to convince them. Do not waste your energy on people who have already decided what you cannot do. Just smile, get quiet, and build it anyway. Because impossible is not a fact. It is an opinion. And opinions, unlike rocket science, are not based on mathematical principles or scientific laws. They are based on fear, on limitation, on the small thinking of people who have forgotten how to dream. I am Zara Blackwood. I was told I could not even parallel park. But I built rockets that touched the edge of space. I was called a hobbyist. But I revolutionized an industry. I was laughed at, dismissed, ignored, and underestimated. And now, the people who doubted me pay premium prices just to learn my secrets. The impossible dream? It was never impossible. It was just waiting for someone stubborn enough, brave enough, and unrealistic enough to make it real. That someone was me. And if you are reading this, if you have a dream that everyone calls impossible, then that someone might just be you too. Do not let them tell you to be realistic. The world has enough realism. What it needs are more dreamers crazy enough to believe that impossible is just another word for not yet. If this story inspired you to chase your own impossible dream, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of transformation, triumph, and turning the impossible into inevitable. Your dreams are waiting for you to get unrealistic enough to make them real.